coming in virtually into the chat. Khalin, man, I know you enjoyed your summer out in Wisconsin. It's good to have you back on the chat, bro. First time together since like April, May, maybe. I don't even know. Lost count. How we doing?
Yeah, George, it's been way too long, but it's great to be back. The summer's over now. I mean, it's September. I don't even know how that's possible, but it's good to be back. Good to be chatting with you. Got a lot to cover. Let's do it.
It's football weather already in Boston. I love it and I hate it all at the same time, but let's get right into it. We'll go with what's trending. And nothing bigger than the 49ers. They came into this offseason with two key players for their success, completely unhappy with their contract situations. Last week, Brandon Ayuk under wraps got him settled. Today, Trent Williams, or as of the recording of this podcast, Trent Williams and the 49ers finalizing a new deal. He's back in San Fran from Houston. Khalin, this is huge. I mean, it's a win now window. And what we see with a lot of teams that go win now is, do they have their quarterback under a cost control contract? We see what the Houston Texans are doing, going all in around CJ Stroud, with the Stephon Diggs, with the Danielle Hunter, with other guys they've acquired in the offseason. For the 49ers, it's right now. Get Brandon Ayuk under a contract. Have Deebo Samuel while he's still healthy and under team control of the team. Same thing with CMC. Now they got their all-world left tackle. Yes, Trent Williams is about to be 36, but he's still one of the best in the game, and he's so crucial for that Kyle Shanahan system. We don't know the details of the contract yet as of right now when we're recording this episode of the chat. I'm expecting 2 years to 29 to 30 million a year in guaranteed money. We'll see the actual numbers, but it is huge to have Trent Williams now in camp, especially before they kick off against the Jets on Monday night.
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of the best players to play the position of all time, George. And the way I thought about it as this kind of thing was swirling around was that Trent Williams did not need the 49ers as much as they needed him. So I was very confident that something was going to play out. I mean, you look at the stats when Williams was on the field last season. CMC averaged over 6 yards per carry running to the left side. He was one of the best pass blockers in the NFL when he was healthy. So it was a no-brainer to get this thing done. But George, you mentioned that window, and it's so interesting because Brock Purdy's going to have to get himself paid at some point soon. Deebo Samuel's going to have to get himself paid at some point soon. A lot of these defensive pieces are going to have to get themselves paid at some point soon. That means that this window is this season for sure, that we don't know what's going to happen next year and the year after that. So the Niners absolutely, unequivocally had to get this done. They did. They look poised to make another run to the Super Bowl as one of the strongest teams in the NFL.
Yeah, how I feel with Deebo, I think this is it for him. Like, this contract is him with the 49ers.
I think Ayuk one was the nail in the coffin.
We know his injury history too, and they're two very different receivers though. Like, Ayuk's a guy that takes the top off the defense. Deebo, and his versatility, his usage is so unique to the 49ers, but he's more underneath intermediate routes. Now, Ricky Pearsall obviously has dealt with his shoulder injury this offseason, and then of course surviving getting robbed, but also shot in the chest. He'll start the season on the PUP. But they draft a guy like Ricky Pearsall out of Florida to be that ultimate Deebo replacement. But Ayuk is that guy. Like, you hit on a top pick like that. He is one of the best receivers in the NFL. We know his yards per pass and through targets average is the highest in the NFL since he's been in the league. But you're right, though. I mean, the window is now. And then once Brock Purdy gets paid, that's when everything will have to shift. We'll see how many years. It's Purdy, CMC, and Ayuk all under contract. But that's when they'll have to go to, we need to get a left tackle. We need to find one in the draft. Then have that under cost control. And then they start looking at a defense as well. But everything's happening right now, and it's always been. Like, last year, if it wasn't against Mahomes, maybe if Drake Greenlaw doesn't get injured, maybe if they have Hufanga, they're all pro safety, actually healthy and playing in the Super Bowl, maybe they beat them. It's all about, can you just get to the Super Bowl? And once they get to that point, hopefully not face Patrick Mahomes. But he's so important, and 36 years old, about to play in his 14th, 15th year in the league, still one of the best left tackles. When we see the details come out, this will probably be a 3-year deal. 2 years are actually real. 3 years, let's say $75 million total value, but 3 years, $60 million guaranteed. The first 2 years are real years. And for the 49ers, the price you have to pay to get a great left tackle, because you know how crucial he is. You're paying Ayuk, you're paying Brock Purdy, you're paying Christian McCaffrey. For those guys to succeed, they need to be protected up front, and that is what Trent Williams provides. All right, let's go to another payday. This one in the NHL. Leon Draisaitl and the Oilers agreed to an 8-year, $112 million contract. Call it $14 million a year AAV. This is the highest annual salary in the NHL history, going to Leon Draisaitl. 8 years at just 28 years old, getting paid. But for right now, with new people running the front office in Edmonton, keeping Draisaitl and Connor McDavid together.
Yeah, it had to happen for Edmonton, especially after the way that this past season ended. You really wanted to keep at least some momentum with this core going for this upcoming season. I saw this contract, and then I saw that it was the highest AAV, the highest number in NHL history, and I just laughed to myself because this is like mid-tier starting pitcher money in the MLB, and it's being shelled out to one of the best players in the NHL. It's just so funny when you think of the hard salary cap in the National Hockey League. But, Draisaitl had said even after last season that he wanted to stay with the team that drafted him, with the team that developed him. And we'll get into this a little bit later when we talk about Elias Lindholm, but it's so important for a player to have their future secure when they start a new season, especially after the way last season ended. So this was obviously needed for Edmonton. They're going to keep McDavid and Draisaitl together. It's going to be so fun to see what Connor McDavid gets paid when his big payday comes around as well. That number should blow Draisaitl out of the water. Will it with Edmonton? Obviously with the salary cap, who knows at this point, but yeah, it needed to happen for Edmonton, and great for Draisaitl to get that number and get that payday.
Yeah, he has 850 points in 719 career games, and he's only making $14 million a year. But that's the issue of the NHL, right, Colin? Like, their TV deal isn't what the NFL and NBA has. Their marketing isn't what those leagues have. The overall money coming into the NHL is not what the NBA and NFL have. I mean, like, Trevor Lawrence is unproven, and he's got 5 years, $200 million guaranteed. 5 years, $200 million guaranteed, $40 million a year. Leon Draisaitl is one of the best players in the NHL. He's only getting 14 mil AAV, but it's awesome to see someone that's been in the league for 10 years, only 28 years old, to get this type of payday. And you're right, I thought the same thing. McDavid's going to be an unrestricted free agent in the 2026 offseason, the summer of 2026. 8 years, 120, 8 years, 130, maybe 10 years. What would we go? 10 years, 150 million. I think it's worth it. He's the most dominant out of all the players, and I'm putting Patrick Mahomes in this. Leon Draisaitl is the most dominant player in his respective pro sport out of any NHL, MLB, NFL right now. That's Connor McDavid. Whatever you pay for him is going to be worth it because he changed his game to a 200-foot game and become an assist artist and still 140-plus points. You pay McDavid what you want, but it's important to have Leon Draisaitl skating next to him.
Yeah, you got to have someone to finish the puck too. And I think back to Connor Bedard as well. When you look, I watched Connor Bedard's highlights this past season, and I just thought to myself, how many unrealized goals are there for the Blackhawks because Bedard's out there passing to, bottom six players when he should be passing to top six players. That's what happens when you have a guy that isn't up with it with Connor Bedard, but with McDavid and Draisaitl, you have a guy you know is going to finish the puck from any angle, from impossible angles, from wherever. That combination is the best combination in the NHL right now. There's no question about it. And the Oilers need to get it, keep them together, and need to do what they need to do to get McDavid to stay long-term. I don't think it's going to be an issue. I don't see McDavid going anywhere else than Edmonton, but still, they got to lock him down for sure when it comes time to do so.
Zach Hyman's happy too. I mean, third most goals in the NHL last season. He's like, all right, so Draisaitl's staying. I still got McDavid. I'll play off of both of them. And again, another finisher in the crease, another finisher around the net for them. All right, and let's get into it. Bruins first captain's practice was on Tuesday. The key piece being there, Jeremy Swayman showed up. I know that is sign of relief for Bruins fans as he's still in ongoing contract negotiations with the Bruins. And reports came out, there was allegedly Swayman wanted 10 mil, but now it's saying reportedly he only wants 8. Reportedly the Bruins are at 6. There's going to be a middle ground in all this. Let's get into the hypotheticals here. Let's talk about it. What we think will happen. What do you picture Jeremy Swayman's new contract to look like? We're talking about a goal scorer that has got paid $14 million a year. Not going to be the case for a netminder, but what do you think Jeremy Swayman's contract will look like, Colin?
Yeah, I saw the reports, after Igor Shesterkin. It was about Igor Shesterkin. They're like, Swayman's kind of wanting up around that number. I think Shesterkin was about 11, but I don't think Swayman's going to get even close to that. I really think that since he is a player that has yet to play a full NHL season as the 1A guy, I don't think it's going to be up near double digits. Like maybe 8 I could see. There was reporting in the Globe a couple of days ago that it could be a bridge deal potentially, that to take him to age 29 and pay him maybe $5 to $6 million. I could see that being the case. But I do like that he's out there with the team, obviously in practice with the captains and everything. It's not a diva holdout type move for Jeremy Swayman, so that's always good. But I think the most realistic scenario here is a number, like you said, George, just in between, kind of finding that middle ground. I wouldn't be surprised to see $7 million or $8 million, or one of those bridge deals that lowers the money a little bit, lets him prove himself as a starting goaltender without having, the spell of Linus Ullmark there as a 1A, 1B, or 1B to Ullmark's 1A. And then, if he plays, 60 games, 65 games, and excels with a 910, 920 save percentage, and you're like, okay, he's entering his prime at age 29. Let's actually shell out the big bucks for him. So at this point, would not be surprised to see a bit of a lower number than what's being reported at the $9 to $10 million mark.
Yeah, Sway's only 25 right now. So I think a bridge deal would be smart on both parts. Like, why tie yourself in to an 8-year, let's say $64 million contract when you can go 4 years, $20 million as the Globe reported. All right, it's $5 million a year, but you bet on yourself. And then out of that, you get an 8-year contract where you can making maybe 9 to 10 million a year. Right. I just look at, and I want to compare it to the other goaltenders across the league. 7.75 million AAV. That is the 6th highest paid goaltender in the league. If you just go flat $7 million a year, that puts him top 8 paid. And you pointed it out. Like, we know what he did last playoffs was unbelievable. He was the reason the Bruins got past the Leafs in the first round and got to make it a series with the Panthers. I mean, his goal saved above expected. Everything he was doing was just absurd. But let's see him do it for an entire 82-game season. We'll see how many starts, 60 to 65 starts. But then also to be the guy that when they go to him in the playoffs, it is him and it is no one else. You need to see that just 25. And if I'm Sway, I would go with the short term. What if he got 3 years, $18 million? That's $6 million a year. And that's at what the Bruins want to give him. Maybe that's what they're looking. All right, let's go 3 years, 6.5, maybe 6.7. All right, $7 million a year. 3 years, $21 million. Then he's 28 and you get paid again. Then you get into the 8.5. And when the Bruins, that's when they have more cap space. They would want the long-term deal. They would want to project ahead, of course, with all that. But I just think it would be smart. Swayman goes short-term in the $7 million range. Bruins get that done, and then they revisit it when he's going into his age 29, age 30 season. Nonetheless, though, Colin, it is just huge for Jeremy Swayman to be there at captain's practice on Tuesday for the Bruins.
Absolutely. It is. And it's one of those things that you really like the character decision there. It's not, sitting out and hoping something gets done behind the scenes. And I will say, just on the point of him not being the guy that both of us just brought up, when you're a starting goaltender in the National Hockey League, you can't take 3 games off for Linus Ullmark, and the team can't afford to give their starting goaltender 3 games off, because not every team has a Linus Ullmark waiting in the wings, has the best goalie tandem in the NHL. Korpisalo coming in that trade is a good goaltender, but I don't expect him to be a 1B to Swayman's 1A. It's going to be a clear starter backup for the Boston Bruins this season, because Swayman has proven that he can be a very, very elite goaltender in this league. But a lot of it had to do, and this is just my opinion, but you look at the stats, after an extended break when Ullmark maybe got 2 or 3 games in a row, Swayman came back, got himself out of a rut, and played amazing. That's just the way this tandem worked and why it worked so well. So you do have to see, can Swayman, one, withstand the rigors of playing 60 to 65 games in an NHL season? That's no small task in and of itself. 2, can he stay consistent? And even if he gets himself into a rut, can he work himself out of that? Those are questions that just haven't been answered, because, George, the fact is he's still really, really young. You mentioned his age. He's not even close to getting into those prime years just yet. So he has time to develop, and the Bruins have time for him to develop into an elite starting goaltender for an entire season, not just 40 starts, not just one playoff run.
Yeah, Korpisalo, we'll see the upgrade he'll have going from a bad Senators team to now playing with a good Bruins team. There should be the uptick, but you're right. I mean, if you get a good 20 starts from Korpisalo, and that just spells Swayman. If you get a good 25 starts from Korpisalo where he's serviceable, and that saves Swayman to be fresher for the playoffs, I mean, that's a huge win. And, of course, we can see what happens with Brandon Busey, of course, who's down with the Providence Bruins and has been in their system for quite some time. Talking about the younger guys, what about new Bruins? Who do you think will be the biggest help to the team? We saw Elias Lindholm was at captain's practice. That's my pick. They severely needed another playmaker, not named David Pastrnak, to help out their top 6, to maybe even help him out on his line. But out of the new Bruin additions, who do you think will be the biggest help to the team?
I think you hit the nail on the head, George. It's Elias Lindholm, and I don't think it's even a question. And this is a guy that's been kind of partnered with the Bruins for the past couple of years. We thought even before last season, Lindholm could be the guy to catapult them over the top because they lost so much talent Obviously, the cap didn't work in the Bruins' favor there, but he's here now, and there's so many reasons why he's a perfect fit for this Bruins team. I can run through a couple. First things first, you mentioned the playmaking aspect, the fact that when he played on a line with Matthew Tkachuk a couple of years ago, he scored 42 goals, had 40-plus assists. He's going to slide up to this top line. He's going to play with David Pastrnak. Daily Faceoff has it projected to be Pavel Zacha on one side, Lindholm in the center, and then David Pastrnak on the right side. Maybe Brad Marchand flips up to the top line as well with Lindholm and Pasta. But regardless, when Lindholm has an elite player like Pastrnak to his right who's going to take attention away, I could very, very easily see Elias Lindholm scoring 30-plus goals this season after having a bit of a down year last season when he split time with Calgary and Vancouver. And also, George, this guy wins a ton of faceoffs. He was, I think, 56.4% from the dot last season. The Bruins were bottom half in the NHL in team faceoff win percentage because of Bergeron leaving, because of Krejci leaving. This is a big improvement from the dot. Lindholm excels in a two-way role. He can match up very well defensively with top forwards. I really think this is a match made in heaven for Boston, George. I really think Lindholm's going to play up to being potentially a point-per-game player. I can see a very realistic scenario, 35 goals, 40-plus assists, gets over that 75 to 80-point plateau, and that's something that the Bruins, from the center position, haven't had in a couple of years since Patrice Bergeron left. I'm really excited to see Elias Lindholm here in Boston. It's been a long time coming. It's been about a year and a half coming for the Bruins, but they finally got their guy. I think Nikita Zadorov's going to add a lot of toughness to the blue line, especially with the departure of a couple of left shot defenders. But Lindholm's not going to be too flashy. He's not going to blow the doors off you, but he's going to quietly and consistently put up a ton of points for Boston. And this is going to be a really, really good signing for the Bruins, and at a pretty solid AAV as well. Didn't break the bank for them. I think this is going to work out really, really well for Boston.
Yeah. We saw it's not just that David Pastrnak will take the attention away from Elias Lindholm. Elias Lindholm will also take the attention away from Pastrnak because teams will have to cater their way to him. It's just both of those guys making them better. And on a line, if Zacha is on the left wing, that's a lot of speed, that's a lot of playmaking, two really good puck handlers, and three guys that could score goals, one of those having one of the most elite shots in the NHL. It just makes that top line so talented. And if there are shuffles within the top six, it just gives a balance and depth, especially down the middle where the Bruins need it the most. Because it's Elias Lindholm, it's Charlie Coyle, it's Matty Patra, and we'll see what happens from that point on. And you mentioned Zadorov too. Nikita Zadorov also gives Mason Lohrei more time to figure out his role and figure out what it takes to be in the NHL. We saw the flashes last year in the postseason. He's a highly touted prospect that came out of Ohio State, that came through the Bruins system. Huge body, huge frame, good puck handler, but he could be on that second or third line on the blue line, and that's fine with him because when you have a Zadorov, a McAvoy, a Lindholm in front of him, then you can take your time bringing them along, and then the playoffs. At that point, you need everyone to play so good. We know how important depth can be at that point. Talking about Lohrei, there's a lot of attention around him, what he did in the playoffs. Everyone remembers what the start was for Matty Patra as well to the start of the season before he was shut down with that shoulder injury. Who do you think will have more of a breakout year, Patra at the center or Lohrei on the blue line for the Bees?
I like this question, George. I think it's probably going to be Lohrei at the blue line just because of what we saw in the biggest moments. I do think, on the Patra side of things, I remember, it wasn't on this show, but I was talking about what he could bring to Boston. And I mentioned just the expectations that were on him because of the lack of spark and the lack of electricity in this lineup were sky high. He had to run in there and basically do everything and be everything at the same time. But Lindholm coming in the center position means there's a lot more depth. And I think Patra's going to have more time to develop. The spotlight's not necessarily going to be on him. So I think it may take a little bit more time for him. But for Lohrei, he flashed some NHL-ready skills while he was in the playoffs and while he was in the tail end of the regular season. I really think he can take an exceptional second-year jump. You mentioned, the edge work on the offensive side of things for Lohrei. For a young player is really, really impressive. He flashed the shot a couple of times, but it's also the defensive IQ that is so impressive for a young player when you're on the blue line. I think he's probably going to be second or third pair here. I would imagine third pair for the start of the season. But when you're a young player, when you have the defensive IQ that he has, he's always in the right spots. He always is on his man if he needs to be, or he's back checking exceptionally when he needs to be. I think we could be staring down the face of a really great second-year breakout for Mason Lohrei, and I think the Bruins know exactly what they need from him, and I think he knows exactly what he needs to provide for Boston. It doesn't have to be everything. He's probably not going to be out there more than 15, 16 minutes a game, maybe even less than that, but in that time, I think he's going to take some strides forward. If there is an injury, if there is some subpar play in the middle pairing, he could jump right back up there into the second pairing and make even more of an impact.
Yeah, it should be Zadorov, McAvoy first line. Then we can see Lindholm, Carlo, and then Mason Lohrei, right. That third line, that third shift for the Bruins defense. And all hopefully playing in front of Jeremy Swayman with an extension. We'll see when the Bruins if the Bruins and Jeremy Swayman can come to an agreement on that. Hey, remember, call in. Boston has entered the chat, 617-790-0928, or email us, thechat@nesson.com. Patriots kick off the season on Sunday, but you got to wait till week 7 for them to have a reunion with Mac Jones. Of course, he's with the Jaguars now. That game will be in London. But nonetheless, we caught up with John Shipley. He covers the Jaguars for Jaguars on SI.com. I spoke with him about Mac Jones, about Doug Peterson, about Trevor Lawrence, all that and more. Check it out right here. He's John Shipley, Jaguars beat reporter on Jaguars on SI. Covers the team. Been covering them for a while now. John, thanks for hopping on Boston's End of the Chat. How you doing today, man?
Hey, appreciate you guys having me.
Hey, we know that the Patriots don't play the Jaguars until week 7 in London. We both can't wait for that early wake up. But ever since Mac Jones signed with Jacksonville in the offseason, these two franchises have been intertwined. Mac is the failed experience of a franchise quarterback for the Patriots. Now he's the backup for a franchise quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. But what have you seen from Mac so far in his short stint with the Jaguars? And what impressions has he made on you as a member of the media? And what have you heard from the team?
Yeah, no, he definitely seems like somebody who I think has kind of accepted his role on the roster and where he's kind of at this time in his career. I've said that I think the Jaguars and Mac both viewed this season as kind of like the Mac Jones rehabilitation, project, trying to get, his career, his image, everything back on track. And I think he's, really settled into that. He's comfortable in the backup role. And, if you take, what the coaches say in press conferences, at 100% face value, which maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't. There was a legitimate competition between him and CJ Beathard, at the start of training camp for that backup job. And it just seemed like throughout all of training camp that Jones was pulling away from him. He's a lot different than Trevor Lawrence. He doesn't have like the athleticism or the ability to kind of improvise inside and outside the pocket, but he gets rid of the ball quick. He has good enough arm strength, good accuracy. It at least seems like they're comfortable if they ever have to head into a game with him that they're okay with it.
Yeah, that checks out. I mean, Mac was a top 25 pick for the Patriots because of his processing. This was a guy that was targeted by Kyle Shanahan coming into the draft because he loved his IQ, his accuracy, his ability to play within the system. Is his ceiling as high as Trevor Lawrence's? Absolutely not. But this is a guy right now, especially after what happened the last 2 years, can be a good backup quarterback for any franchise to have. But we also know that he signed with the Jaguars, and then Doug Peterson made waves, especially up here in Boston, saying that sometimes he sees Mac revert back to his Patriot ways. From what you heard, from what you cover this team every day, from what you see from Mac, what did Doug Peterson mean by those comments?
Yeah, so, Doug later said it seemed like he knew that he had more or less stepped into it. He, later said by his way of putting it, he was saying like at times he'll come up with like hand signals or verbiage that he had used in New England when said, maybe they're trying to do something similar in Jacksonville in terms of the actual scheme and what they're trying to run. But he's just pulling up stuff from, his past couple of years. So it was interesting that he said Patriot ways specifically, but I really think, Max entered Jacksonville as a guy who, he's ready to put New England and, that experience behind him. He's not somebody who, he'll answer it when he gets asked, but he's not somebody who's openly, like pointing it out for you, up there every day. It's clear that I think he's trying to really move on to this next step of his career and get past whatever happened in New England.
Yeah, after going from a Pro Bowl alternate his rookie season to 2022's failed experiment with Matt Patricia and Joe Judge, to 2023 just looked like a broken piece, like forgot how to play football. I don't blame him for wanting to put that behind him. Is Doug Peterson that kind of coach that is calculated with what he says in the media and a guy that's been around football forever, been around great coaches like Andy Reid? He probably misspoke, but he wouldn't, intentionally go to dog on the Patriots and take a dig at another franchise?
Yeah, no, 100%. Doug's very, I've said it before. He's helped the Jaguars kind of become a grown-up franchise. They went from being, everybody's little brother who they could beat up on to he's helped the Jaguars kind of mature and get past some of their ways. I definitely think it was just something that in the immediate aftermath of the game. And, we don't know the entire content. Like, there's probably something that happened in that preseason finale where Mac, completely screwed up a call or something, brought back something from New England. But I definitely anticipate Doug being that way. And Doug's somebody who, he's always a coach who shows a lot of respect, to the opposing teams, opposing coaches. And he's somebody who he also understands the importance and the role of a backup quarterback. I mean, he is a backup quarterback himself. He developed backup quarterbacks. Nick Foles, obviously, a lot of success. So I think he understands from all the different angles, kind of how to approach Mac.
Yeah, and that's what we know him as a QB whisperer. Now, Mac obviously was acquired by the Jaguars. Do you see him as a long-term backup piece for Trevor Lawrence, especially after T-Law signed that extension? Or do you think Mac could be a guy that they get him in, they fix him, they get him back to being a serviceable starting-level quarterback and could maybe be a trade piece down the line for a team that made moves this offseason, get closer and back into the playoffs, but maybe if they need something to push him over the top?
I really think that's their hope with Mac. It's, twofold. One, they saw what happened last year when Trevor was banged up. Their best option a lot of weeks was an injured Trevor Lawrence starting the game just because they didn't have that backup option behind him. CJ Beathard obviously had a great relationship with Lawrence, but he just, he wasn't somebody who many teams are rolling out there as a starter on, many given Sundays. So I think that was a part of it. And also think, maybe they help Mac out. Mac helps them out. Say Mac signs with a quarterback needy team in free agency next year. The parameters to get a compensatory pick for quarterbacks are relatively low. He wouldn't need to sign a major deal at all. So it could be, in my opinion, some long-term planning like that. I don't expect him to be in Jacksonville long. That's not my expectation.
Hey, they traded just a 6th-round pick in order to get a good backup quarterback. And again, you said if he signs somewhere else, compensatory pick in return. If that gets him a 5th-rounder or better, that's just good, smart business by the Jaguars. All right, enough talking with the backup quarterback. Let's talk Trevor Lawrence. We know he signed that 5-year, $275 million extension this offseason. A lot of people mocked him. I say 2021 was a lost year because of Urban Meyer. 2023 was a tough year because of how banged up the offensive line was and how injured Trevor Lawrence was, as you mentioned, and what he had to play through. But what's the belief behind him in that building in Jacksonville?
Oh, it's as high as I think it's been really since I've covered him. I've covered the entirety of Trevor's career so far. I really think that they feel he's in a good place right now. He had one of his better training camps. He didn't play much in the preseason, but when he did, I think they scored on like 4 or 5 drives, something like that. So he at least showed, that he's in command and he's ready, I think, physically, athletically, whatever you want to call it, to take the leap on the field. It's just he has to do the little things. He has to make sure to keep himself safe. I think that's probably the biggest lesson he had to learn last year is, like you're the franchise quarterback. Maybe don't, put your shoulder down and try to get an extra yard when you're going out of bounds. Maybe don't try to, elongate this play. Try to protect yourself because there are a lot of jobs and a lot of people's livelihoods that rely on him. And I think that's probably the biggest lesson he had to learn coming into this year. But there's a lot of positivity surrounding him, and a lot of people internally feel like he's about to have a really good season.
What have you seen? You said you covered him his whole career. We know 2021 where it was one of the most toxic, worst cultures you could be in of what Urban Meyer did to that franchise. And that was his rookie season. Now getting into his 4th year into the league, 4th year as a starter, of course, for this team. How have you seen Trevor Lawrence come along as a leader, of course, being a quarterback, but also just overall as a professional athlete that has to take on more than just being the guy under center, but the guy in the building, especially once you get a contract like that?
Yeah, no, I think I've definitely seen Lawrence become much more vocal over the years. His rookie year, I think even if you're a quarterback, most rookies kind of accept it's, kind of speak when you're spoken to kind of thing. But there were a lot of times where, Urban Meyer would, put his foot in his mouth, do something, and the rookie 21-year-old quarterback was the one answering questions about it at the podium. So I think that helped him grow a lot that year. And over the years, I think you've seen him become more of a vocal leader on the field. He's not like a super, out loud, bombacious guy, on the offset personality wise, but you will see him get more, intense, correcting guys, really telling them how to elevate their play. And then just as a player, I think, he came into the league with a ton of physical tools, all the traits that you want, but there wasn't a lot of fine tuning. He has said, he didn't even take a single snap under center at Clemson. So he had to relearn a lot of things about the quarterback position. I think you've just seen him become a more refined, more efficient passer over the years.
Yeah, efficient, loves to take the deep shot down the field. And I love that gets into the new weapons he has. We know that they bring in Gabe Davis, signed him over from Buffalo. Big, athletic guy, good downfield target. But really the one is Brian Thomas Jr., the rookie out of LSU. What does the addition of those two receivers on the outside for a quarterback that loves to take deep shots down the field, what do they do to help enhance and improve Trevor Lawrence's game?
Yeah, no, I mean, if you break down Trevor Lawrence by the numbers, he's been at his best the last couple of years when pushing the ball downfield. The thing is, Jacksonville has not had many vertical threats with Trevor Lawrence on the roster. His rookie year, he had DJ Chark for like 4 games before he got hurt, and then he was chucking up, deep balls to Laquan Treadwell and Tavon Austin. His next year, Zay Jones and Marvin Jones. No team was really looking at them as a number one vertical threat. And then last year, Calvin Ridley kind of got miscast as that vertical threat. He has the speed to beat defenses deep, but he's just not the person you want stretching the field every play. I really think Brian Thomas is the best pure vertical threat, deep guy that Trevor Lawrence has had skill set wise in his career with the Jaguars. I think they fit together perfectly because Trevor, at his core is a big arm quarterback who wants to push the ball downfield. And Thomas showed a lot in training camp. He had a little bit of a slow start the first couple of weeks, but it seemed like all it took was for him to make one play in training camp, and then he just started stacking days, stacking performances. It really looks like they're going to be a good combination moving forward.
And what is the expectation, too, from an Evan Ingram, a Travis Etienne, those guys that add a lot in the pass game, but, of course, this offense overall as well?
Yeah, no, I think Ingram, it wouldn't surprise me if Ingram was still top 2 in targets along with Christian Kirk, just because he has such great chemistry with Trevor Lawrence. I mean, you saw him catch 2 touchdown passes in the preseason finale. I mean, it's for a reason. He was probably the most targeted player by Trevor Lawrence in training camp this year. This is now their 3rd year together. And Etienne, I think the Jaguars are expecting an even bigger year out of him this year. He hit over 1,000 yards last year. He had good touchdown numbers, but his yards per carry was below, the usual people are looking for, at least 4 yards. He was at, I believe, 3.8. So they want to see a little more efficiency. They hope that comes from the blocking. And they think he can take a bigger role as a pass catcher this year as well.
Is there belief in the offensive line? I mean, we talked about the quarterback. We talked about all his weapons. But end of the day, if Trevor Lawrence isn't upright and healthy, this team isn't going to go where they want to. Is there belief in the offensive line, the 5 guys they have up front right now, that they can make it through the season, keep him healthy? And as you just mentioned, too, even get the run game going, which will help out T-Law and his receivers as well.
Yeah, so internally it still feels like they kind of have to prove it to everybody else. Look at the Week 18 starting offensive line against the Titans. 4 of the 5 guys from that team are returning to start on this year's offensive line. The only difference is they benched former 3rd-round pick Luke Fortner. They brought in Mitch Morse from the Buffalo Bills. It's definitely an offensive line that has potential. It should have a raised floor from what we saw last year, but the Jaguars are banking on a lot of things. They're specifically banking on guys to stay healthy. That was a big issue for them last year, and they haven't really done much to upgrade the offensive line depth. So their starters should be, fine, but there's one injury to it. It could be a unit that comes down pretty quickly.
And finally, let's get into some defense, John, on this one. The underrated addition for them this offseason, in my opinion, was Eric Armstead. Sign him. That's a good interior pass rusher to complement Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker, who were great on the edge as rushers last season. What does that addition of Eric Armstead do for this defensive line to improve? And, of course, you get it up front, you win the line of scrimmage. It helps out everything that happens behind them on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, no, I mean, Trayvon Walker and Josh Allen last year, 27.5 combined sacks. They were a terror last year, but beyond them, the Jaguars just didn't get much pass rush production, especially the interior. You look at stuff like pass rush win rate and pressure rate. Most of their defense tackles were in the very bottom, tier of qualifying defensive tackles. So I think that's somewhere Armstead's going to be asked to help a lot is the interior pass rush. And then Armstead's also somebody who they've talked about him even playing some defensive end, moving him up and down the formation. Trayvon Walker, when he was coming out of Georgia, the big thing with him was positional versatility. This is a guy who can win inside and outside. He hasn't lined up much inside in Jacksonville. So now having Armstead, have the potential to move Walker a little bit more, maybe a little bit more like he was always designed to.
Yeah, looking at Trayvon Walker, Josh Allen's numbers, a combined 93 hurries they had together last season. It's all about getting to the quarterback. Obviously, you want to sack him, but speeding him up and speeding up that offense. John, what do you think is the realistic ceiling for this Jaguars team?
I think 10-7. I think if everything breaks right, they're a 10-7 team. They're entering the playoffs in some fashion, but they do have a tough first month of the season. They play 4 teams that are in the playoffs in their first 4 games. They do get a little bit of a break. They play some inexperienced quarterbacks, some rookie quarterbacks throughout the season, but just with how tough the AFC is and the AFC South in general, I think a 10-win season is probably the best possible outcome.
Yeah, an AFC South with Indianapolis Colts, with the Houston Texans, of course, being in that division. You say they open up with a lot of playoff teams. Week 7, they get the Patriots in London. It'll either be Jacoby Brissett with a bad offensive line, or maybe that could be Drake May making his second, third possible start of his career. What would you say would be a successful season for this Jaguars team? You say 10-7 getting into the playoffs. Is it just getting in, or is it getting in and winning a game or two and advancing down the postseason path?
I think they have to get in advance. I think owner Shad Khan has made clear this season that his expectations are higher than they've been in the past. I mean, he even told the team he thinks this is the best team the franchise in its totality has assembled, roster-wise, coaching staff-wise. So I definitely think from the owner's perception that they're looking for more than just, a wild card exit. I think they're hoping for more than that this year.
Hey, we've seen Doug Peterson do it before with different franchises. The Eagles, of course. We know Trevor Lawrence is a guy that could get the job done, so wouldn't be surprised to see him get in. And, of course, if they take that step forward, that's big for Trevor Lawrence. That's big for the Jaguars as a franchise of a whole. I would just love to see it in the NFL. He's John Shipley, Jaguars beat reporter for Jaguars on SI. John, appreciate you taking the time. We'll probably talk again in that lead up to that London matchup between the Patriots and Jags.
Sounds good, brother. See you then.
Thank you, John. Shout out to John Shipley of Jaguars on SI. Colin, I loved his, assessing how Doug Peterson said that if Mac Jones reverts back to his Patriots way. And then he clarified, it's like hand signals, it's calling, he's a respectful guy. It's just interesting to hear how Mac Jones has accepted his role. I think the guy had to be humbled. I mean, how things broke down up here in New England for him to go down to Jacksonville, where he's from, back home, and just get back to playing football. There has to be a return of joy for him. And if you think about it for Mac Jones, I mean, it just has to be a welcomed sight of this is a guy that was coached by Brian Daboll, Steve Sarkisian at Alabama, Josh McDaniels as well. The Bill O'Brien tenure was terrible, but still learned football from Bill O'Brien. To now be with Doug Peterson and to be in a situation where he's like, all right, I'm back where the focus is setting up a quarterback for success, and I don't have to be the starter. I think it's a good refresher for Mac Jones. Does he ever become anything? I think he's a lifetime backup. I just don't think he has it, end of the day. I don't think he can overcome adversity, which you need to be a starting QB. And I just think, as we heard from his teammates in New England, the false bravado he carried, where he would act like he has a confidence, but it's not really there. And he would carry himself a certain way because he's starting quarterback. Guys see through that. But nonetheless, his skill set, his IQ, and his ability to execute a system, I think he'll be in the league for 10, 12 years as a backup quarterback. And, bro, that's a career I would take any day out of the week.
Yeah, just look at Chase Daniel's career earnings, George. I mean, it makes me feel like I should have been a backup quarterback, right? But regardless, I'm not necessarily ready to write Mac off as a starting caliber quarterback. I'm sure he's going to get chances again. Maybe his experience in Jacksonville has changed that mindset a little bit. He's still only 25. He's got his entire career ahead of him. And I think back, we were part of this media ecosystem here in New England that put so much pressure on Mac, and I'm sure there was internal pressure as well. I remember a quote that he led a game-winning drive last season. He said, I finally felt like I had joy back in my game again. And then it kind of got beaten out of him right after that, when the way that his tenure in New England ended. So yeah, I don't think he's going to be much in Jacksonville. Maybe Trevor Lawrence sustains an injury for a week or two and Jones has to come in. The Jags do not have a good offensive line. It's bottom 10 in the NFL. So maybe, but I think there is a chance if he gets that mindset shift, maybe being a backup quarterback and being able to get meaningful reps with no pressure in practice means that he can get more of a confident mindset and be able to instill confidence in teammates. Maybe he gets a chance down the line. It's probably not going to be Super Bowl champion Mac Jones leading his team to a fourth quarter comeback. But, I still think there's a chance he can be a legitimate starter in this league. It might take a couple of years, and I don't think it's going to be in Jacksonville.
No, I don't think it would be in Jacksonville either, but whatever. They gave up a 6th-round pick for a former 1st-round pick. So if they get anything in return, if he leaves, it becomes a compensatory signing, get a compensatory pick in return, and say it's a 4th-rounder, well, that's just good dealings by the Jaguars. And nonetheless, the Patriots fumbled away and ruined that. And that's why they got to be careful with Drake May. But we know we've talked about that ad nauseum. I just can't wait for the season to be here. And I am interested to see how the Jaguars do, especially in a stacked AFC. Hey, we can't talk football. Let's just talk about it one more time. I mean, revisit that BC win, beating Florida State down in Tallahassee, 10th ranked Seminoles. Colin, to me, this was huge because it's Boston College's first game of the season, let alone first game with Bill O'Brien, now the head coach there. We know how good he was with the Texans, how good he was with Penn State as a head coach. But as a Seminoles team coming off a loss to Georgia Tech, is desperate to win in their home stadium, night game, only game on TV. You don't want to play in Tallahassee at night. And BC just dominated them, especially at the line of scrimmage. Held Florida State 3 for 14 on third down, just 21 rushing yards, while they ran for 263 yards on the ground themselves. Castellanos didn't have to be Superman. He played within Bill O'Brien's system. We saw how that shined through. And I think DJU, he's not good. We've seen it. Clemson, Oregon State now. I think it's going to be a very bad Florida State team, but that doesn't say this BC win doesn't show flashes of what they can do. Took care of the football, not a lot of penalties. Castellanos plays within the system. And with how wide open the ACC is, there's tough matchups like Michigan State, Virginia Tech, SMU, games like that on the road at Mizzou. But if this is a 3 or 4 loss BC team, that is a huge win in the Heights for their football program.
Absolutely. There's no question about it. And, I was thinking about this game. I was watching it, and I was like, how much of this is BC being good or FSU just, wetting the bed throughout the entire game? I think there's a little bit of both, but you mentioned Bill O'Brien's system and Castellanos playing within it, the entire team playing within it. You can't really pinpoint maybe 1 or 2 specific plays here and there that BC did anything catastrophically wrong. They took care of the football. They took just 1 penalty compared to FSU, I believe, taking 7. They ran the house on him compared to FSU running, like you said, George, for 21 yards. And they got a key pick there, got down to the 6-yard line, and executed from the goal line. DJU and FSU couldn't do that. They settled for a couple of field goals at halftime. So I really think BC did everything right here. They ran the ball down FSU's throats, and that's the key thing. I mean, you remember going into the season, FSU, there were question marks on the quarterback position, but where there weren't any question marks was the defensive line in the front, in the trenches for the Seminoles team, and BC saw that and were like, nah, this is no problem for me, and they absolutely pummeled them where it mattered the most, and that's what you said, George, at the line of scrimmage. I think this BC team could be something special. Now, are they going to win the national championship? No, obviously, but they don't have to. What they have to do, we can get into this in just a second, is put themselves back on the map, be a competitive football team, not get blown out every single week. I don't see this team getting blown out every single week if they adhere to the fundamentals that clearly Bill O'Brien is preaching to them. Take care of the football, don't take penalties, control possession, which they did 19 minutes more of ball possession than FSU throughout this entire game. Everything went right for BC. It's not just that FSU was so bad. Boston College did a lot right here in this game, and they got rewarded for it.
Yeah, it took 2 to tango that night. And I think this is going to be an awful FSU team. I mean, they lost all the talent and Jordan Travis on their offensive side, lost Jared Verse, who's arguably the best pass rusher, and Braden Fisk to the draft as well. That's a lot to replace. But there's also an FSU team that had the 7th best draft recruiting class looking at the transfer portal. That says a lot on how they can reload, getting all those 4 stars back into Tallahassee. But I just think we see the product of DJU, who can't run a Mike Norvell system, but Jordan Travis can do it. Mike Norvell, going back to his Memphis days, has always been one of the best offensive-minded head coaches in college football. That's how he made the jump from Memphis to Florida State. I think it's a bad FSU team, but I'm not going to take away from what BC did right. They can do the little things. They can steal a game at SMU, at Vatech, maybe against Michigan State. They can steal one of those games. Again, first year with a new head coach, 7, 8, maybe 9 wins. That is a great year for Boston College. He's Khalin Kapoor. I'm George Balekji in the PNC Bank studio. Thank you so much for tuning in to Boston Has Entered the Chat. Please like, subscribe, rate, review wherever you're listening, or if you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button on Nesson's YouTube page as well. We'll see you guys same time, same place tomorrow. Have a good one.